Good morning, everybody, and welcome to my live video. I'm just hoping that technically everything is all right. I can't actually see if anybody's joined me yet, but if you have, maybe you could let me know that you can see and hear me by sending me a heart or a smiley face or anything you fancy, really. That would be very helpful. Okay, so it is just gone 11. So I'm just going to take a sip of tea. Hope you've got one with you as well. That's good. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Rebecca from homeopathygiveswings.com, and I use homeopathic remedies to help you to recover as fast as possible from physical illness, from emotional illness, and sometimes from spiritual illness, and sometimes all three, so that you can lead whatever life that you want to lead as healthily and as happily as possible. And one of my major passions, as those of you who watch me regularly will know, is to teach as many of you as possible how to actually use homeopathic remedies yourselves at home to help you and your family get better from minor illnesses. And part of that commitment is doing a series of videos, of which this is one, where we go into the more commonly used remedies, remedies that are usually in home prescribing kits like this one. And we go into a bit more detail so that you can find it hopefully easier to select the remedies when you're prescribing at home. And you can understand the underlying causes of illness a bit better, and hopefully maybe even be inspired to work further with me, either in one-to-one consultations for yourself or your family, or by perhaps joining one of my teaching courses. I do have a special offer on my online course at the moment, so if you're interested in learning more about how to use kits like that one that I just showed you, or just remedies in general, then just click on the link that's with this video. Okay. So today's video, we're going to be exploring the remedy Staphylos aureus. Bit of a mouthful. It's more commonly known, I guess, by gardeners as delphinium. The tall, kind of bluey, purpley flowers that are commonly used in borders in gardens. Another common name would be stavacre. And it's a fantastic remedy. It's a remedy that I use quite regularly, actually. But I'm getting the sense from feedback from those of you who are already on my course and generally that it's not a remedy that's used very, very much by you when you're home prescribing. And I can only think that's because maybe you're not understanding the remedy or you've never been taught about it. But anyway, I hope that today's video will address that issue. So, can't see anybody yet. If you've had any experience of Staphylos aureus, either yourselves or perhaps it's been prescribed for you or for somebody you know, then I'd love to hear what experiences you've had with it. Or just send me a thumbs up to let me know that you've used it and that you found it successful for whatever reason. So I'm going to start now really going into it. It is a polycrest remedy, and I've discussed this in previous videos. What a polycrest remedy means is that it's quite a big remedy. It's capable of addressing a huge array of illnesses, both on the emotional level and the physical level. And we'll go into detail as to why that might be the case. It's also a polycrest remedy because it's been around for a long time. It's been well used. Its effects have been well recorded. and it was originally found and proved by Hahnemann himself, who is regarded as the father of modern homeopathy. So that was back in the, well, actually, I'm not sure exactly when he did the proving. So it could have been late 19th century, or it could have been early 20th century. Not 100% sure of that at the moment, but I will check. So herbally, it's been used for centuries, actually. The delphinium seeds were used by early herbalists to address toothache. It was used as an emetic, so to help vomiting and purging. And it was also used by the ancient Egyptians and I think the Romans as a kind of anti-body vermin, so lice, fleas, things like that. And all those areas are actually still areas that are addressed by the homeopathic version of Staphylos aureus. So, as we said, it's a delphinium. It belongs to the ranunculi family of plants, which is actually the same family as the buttercup. And its alternative name is larkspur, or what's the other one? Can't think of the other one at the moment. But it's a very tall, very upright plant, which likes alkaline soils. It likes to grow in mountainous regions of the Mediterranean and of Southwest Asia. And I'll talk a little bit about the doctrine of signatures, which I find helpful to kind of get a picture of the remedy, basically. As I've said, it's bluey purpley in appearance. And its kind of tallness and straightness, if you like, is much prized by gardeners as a border plant. And it's a very beautiful flower. But it's kind of also its weakness, if you like, because the stems, although the plant looks very tall and proper and erect, and it's actually prized among gardeners for its elegance, and it's known as the gardener's aristocrat, or queen of the border. It's prized for those reasons, but it's actually very weak. Oh, now we have got somebody on. Thank you very much for your heart. For some reason, I can't see who is watching, so you're maybe going to have to let me know. Anyway, so that tallness and that straightness and that very upright appearance is prized amongst gardeners, but it is also its weakness, because the stems of the delphinium are actually hollow. So they're very, good morning, Sheila. I will come on to your question later if you don't mind. So we're talking today about Staphylos aureus, and the stems of the delphinium plant are hollow, as we said, and that means that they're actually quite weak. They're very easily damaged. The whole plant can be very easily snapped, and it's made particularly vulnerable because of its beautiful flowers. So they're quite heavy for that hollow stem. So if we're thinking about the doctrine of signatures, which is basically a device that early herbalists used to think about the appearance and behaviour of a plant and see does that indicate what its medicinal uses are. And yes, that kind of juxtaposition in a delphinium flower is mirrored in Staphylos aureus as a medicine, in that it has an outward appearance of being very proper, very upright, very regimented almost, but it is extremely sensitive to any kind of damage, any kind of criticism, any kind of emotional upset, but also physical upset, as we'll come on to explore. It's a highly poisonous plant. And as we said, the Romans and the Egyptians used the seeds as a kind of insecticide. And interestingly, Staphylos aureus is used as both a prophylactic, so a preventative for insect bites. And again, we'll come on to understand why. But it's also used to address the effects of them afterwards as well. So it also traditionally was used to help puncture wounds and cutting, stabbing wounds, anything where the tissue has been lacerated in some way. And also from the effects of venomous creatures. Even I think the Egyptians used it to help scorpion bites. So that's a few of the history of it. And when we think about how homeopathic remedies are found, which is basically recording the effects of a poisoning, of toxicity from whatever the substance is, there is a list of recorded toxic effects from eating or ingesting the Staphylos aureus plant. And that would be a loss of appetite, or actually the polar opposite. It can be an increased appetite with no kind of satisfaction. There can be a general sense of uneasiness. There can be a staggering way of walking. It's almost like someone's drunk. Extreme nausea and vomiting and bloating can be a cause, a result of a poisoning from the Delphinium plant. Lots of vomiting and purging, actually, and that's indeed what it was used for herbally, to help get rid of other toxins and get things out of your body. It also has a massive effect on the nervous system. And when we go back to that kind of doctrine of signatures of the plant being highly sensitive to any external stimulus, that again is mirrored in the action of the drug made from the plant. It can even cause a paralysis of the nervous system. So just an interesting little story for you, an aside. In Greek mythology, the larkspur plant is associated with the Greek hero Ajax, which some of you may have heard of, I don't know. He was one of the early, very powerful warriors in the Trojan War. And he reached a stage where he became not the best warrior in the army, because he was usurped by the newcomer Achilles, and later on Odysseus. And he felt deeply embarrassed and humiliated by this shift of his power, if you like, his toppling from the top. And his anger at that humiliation and that embarrassment led him through a series of events to end up slaughtering the cattle and the goats that the army were using, that was keeping them going, basically. And afterwards, when he realised what he'd done, he was just so mortified that he actually killed himself. He fell on his sword. And it's interesting that that is kind of the epitome of what Staphylos aureus is all about. It's about the great sensitivity to humiliation and embarrassment and pain as well, but not an inability to express that in the right way, and therefore allowing the anger to be misdirected and often doing things that we regret. Good morning, Noel. You're very welcome. We're just talking about the remedy Staphylos aureus this morning. Also another story, good story to help you remember, is the medieval knights. don't know how good any of you are at your history, but the whole kind of knights and fighting things for your lady was a kind of odd system of chivalry. And hello, Noel. And it was, I don't know what it was set up to do really, but it very much mirrors what Stafford Saggara is all about, in that the knights were meant to be, they had a very strict honour code. They had they were upright and they fought for honour, and they had certain manners and ways of living that they needed to adhere to. And seemingly they were gentle, they picked a lady to fight for, and it was all about honour and chivalry and being upright in their armour and all the rest of it. But if anybody offended them, if anybody transgressed that honour code in any way, or did anything to the symbol of that code, their princess, their lady, or their queen, then they were a pretty bloodthirsty lot, actually. And there were a lot of deaths caused by that. Kind of a bit of a flimsy excuse for a good fight, I think. But interestingly, their weapons at the time were lances and swords, which, if you think about it, cause puncture wounds and lacerating wounds to the tissue. And again, that is exactly what Stafford Saggara's physical illnesses can be centred around, which is what makes it a brilliant remedy for things like post-surgery, childbirth, if you've been a victim of an assault, anything like that. And good morning, Mags. You're very welcome. Do pitch in with any Stafford Saggara stories if you have them. Okay. So those are two stories I hope that will kind of set a picture of Stafford Saggara and what's behind it in your minds. So first of all, let's go into now Mags has just made a comment. Just looking in as I'm passing. Excellent. Right, thank you. And I'm sure you've used Stafford Saggara in the past, either for your own clients. Yes, Mags is saying such a great remedy. Quite an underused remedy, I think. So, yeah, that's what we're talking about this morning. So, mental emotional symptoms. So the first thing to think of, and we're thinking back to those knights, those medieval knights, and indeed Ajax, the Greek hero. Pride and honour is very important to somebody who might need Stafford Saggara. And that pride and that aloofness, that pride and that honour can mean that these very upright people are quite aloof. They like to keep themselves a little bit separate from people. It's really because there's an innate fear, underlying fear of being damaged. Just going back to that tall, erect flower again. And there's also a fear that other people will notice, will see that they are very sensitive underneath this erect exterior, and therefore very weak and can be hurt easily. So it's a protective measure, basically, that aloofness. They also have another side of them. They want to protect that weakness, but they feel they're almost kind of too dignified to descend into any fights or arguments or any kind of battles, if you like. They don't like losing control. So rather than respond to something that they think is an insult or something that they don't agree with or that has made them angry in some way, they will walk away from it. But they will carry that anger and that sense of humiliation and that their pride has been damaged. They'll carry it with them. So although for some reason, and we'll come on to that, they don't feel they can actually display that to the person who has made them feel it, they will have it leak out to those people that they love, and therefore that they feel kind of reasonably safe with. So you'll often get people who are quite upright citizens and very well behaved and very obedient and honourable, suddenly becoming very irritable at very small things. So if you have that sense with anybody, and this can happen with children as well, given the right circumstances, then think of the remedy Staphylos aureus. Now, Sheila's asking me a question. Sheila's saying, what do you use it for? And is it easy to buy or to make? And, well, we're going to come on to what you can use it for. And obviously, one of the reasons would be these mental emotional symptoms that I'm talking about at the moment. You can buy it. It is in these first aid kits. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure whether you can buy it over the counter anymore. Maybe Mags can correct me on that. It may be available in your health food store. I'm not sure. But you can order it from a homeopathic pharmacy, or obviously from your homeopathic practitioner. Although most of the time practitioners do like to know, what you're using it for and whether that is in fact the right remedy. So in terms of making it, obviously you can make a herbal remedy. You'd have to ask a herbalist about that. Homeopathically, very difficult to make yourself. You'd have to be trained in homeopathic pharmacy rituals in order to know how to do that. Much easier and probably cheaper to order it yourself from the pharmacy. So I hope that answers your question, Sheila. So where was I? Okay, mental emotional symptoms. Yes, normally very gentle people, quite mild-mannered, quite respectful of authority. But also they hate to be contradicted. They hate to be told what to do. And the reason they don't like that, especially from somebody that they think is in authority, is because of that feeling of respect for authority, that reticence about losing control, especially in front of people of authority, and also that fear that the person in authority will see that they are in fact a little bit weak, that they have a vulnerability there that they don't like to show. So what Staphylos aureus people have is a perception that they are powerless, that they cannot express themselves fully when they are hurt or angered or feel they've been put in a vulnerable position. And that is really the key to understanding this remedy. So what they do, and what we all do when we can't express ourselves, is, unless we've done a lot of work on working those issues through, we will express what we really want to be expressing to the person who's instigated these feelings. We'll show it to all the people around us. So that's where the irritability comes in. As we said, very sensitive to rudeness, to criticism, to being offended, being insulted, and feeling that they've been dominated in any way. So when you think about those kind of situations and where we might feel that our power has been taken away, you can see why it can be very, very helpful for women who have had a particularly traumatic experience in childbirth, for example. And this is not about measuring whether an experience is in fact traumatic or not, or has been done correctly or not. It is about the woman's own internal perception of what happened. So if a woman comes away feeling that her birth plan wasn't respected, maybe, or that she didn't have a birth plan and therefore she was persuaded to perhaps take medications or get into positions that she didn't really want to be in, that can set up all sorts of physical pathology, which we'll come on to, but also that underlying feeling that, my power's been taken away and I didn't have the opportunity to express that. So now it's just sitting and affecting me on a daily basis. Other situations where that may be true is any kind of surgical procedure, particularly if it's not really been thought about and fully conscious decision made that this is the best choice for me. Making a positive decision about any kind of surgery will affect the outcome of your recovery from that surgery, actually, and there's lots of studies to support that. Dental procedures, often, people, we don't like having people messing around in our mouths, and it's a very primal fear, because if anybody's messing around in our mouths and in our throats, it could stop us from breathing, and that is down at the animal base level of survival. You stop me from breathing and then I die. So, on a subconscious level, that fear of a lack of control, fear of possibly being threatened at a primal level, can tip someone into a Staphylococcus aureus state. And dental procedures in particular, actually, because anything to do with teeth is a big Staphylococcus aureus symptom, big use of Staphylococcus aureus. Often people needing Staphylococcus aureus will have a history of rotting teeth or bleeding gums or lots of toothaches, or perhaps they've just needed a lot of dental surgical procedures or dental procedures, and that has meant that they are constantly in a position where they feel threatened or not fully in their power. I used it myself quite recently, actually, because I had to have, for various different reasons, I had to have a series of dental procedures, and I had the mother of all toothaches after one of them, and the only thing that took it away like that was a very, very high dose of Staphylococcus aureus. So if you've tried the kind of more conventional dental remedies, things like hypericum or arnica or any of those remedies that are to do with dental pain, then and you've not had success, think of Staphylococcus aureus. Think about the procedure itself. How did you feel about it? Does it fit in with Staphylococcus aureus? So what else can we say? Yes, they because they respect authority and they respect power, they give into it very easily. So although in doing so it makes them angry, they will give into it easily. So look for that kind of dynamic. They're very skilled at avoiding uncomfortable situations. So at the moment, I can't think of a typical example of that, but all those fears that they have about being vulnerable and powerless, they'll be pretty good, pretty well versed at avoiding those issues if they can. They're very romantic, so they have lots of romantic ideals in relationships. Often to the point of obsession, actually. If we go back to those chivalrous medieval knights, they had their lady, if you didn't know that. I just lost connection there. Sorry about that. Yes, ladies put on a pedestal. That comes from that era where the lady sat up on a heightened dais with the king or with her prince or whatever, and the knights fought below. So the lady's up on a pedestal. So that expression, putting someone on a pedestal, is very much what Staphysagrias can do when they like somebody. They will idolise them. They will actually become quite obsessed with them. And then if that relationship actually does come to fruition, and I think this is probably more pertinent for previous generations, but I do see it now. Often the reality, if the relationship gets off the ground, can be a disappointment, and that again can be a tipping point for a Staphysagria. As well, often in the days when it was much more prevalent that somebody didn't have a sexual relationship before marriage, the actual act of intercourse could set up all sorts of Staphysagria type pathology, not only because it was often a great letdown or a shock even, and that the woman would feel powerless, vulnerable, not in control, and while still being in the knowledge that this was clearly something that always happened. So you can see there is your pattern. That's your archetypal pattern for Staphysagria. Excuse me, emotionally, but also physically. There could have been a laceration of tissues. There could have been, clumsy attempts from a lack of knowledge on the woman's part as well. It was known actually in the old Materia Medicas as honeymoon cystitis. And often, still these days, a lot of women will go into a Staphysagria state, either physically or emotionally or both, from some kind of perception that they've been violated. Sometimes because they have actually been violated, and that can mean anything from an actual full-on rape, or it can be in a relationship where the woman doesn't really want to be agreeing to sexual intercourse, but somehow they feel they need to. So there's that feeling of, I'm not really in control, I don't really have power here, I don't have the power to say no or to be angry about it, or, often women can feel humiliated. So it can set up physical pathology, and the most common one will be something like a UTI, a bladder infection of some sort, even going deeper into a kidney infection. Maybe, Sheila, that will start to answer some of your questions about how to use it. There can be a history in somebody of that feeling of powerlessness, and that can manifest either in, obviously in the extreme form, something like sexual abuse or rape, or, being a victim of some sort. Often people get stuck in that state, and a pattern is set up so that there is a feeling that they are almost a perpetual victim. They can be very easily bullied or dominated in some way, and there tends to be a pattern of women picking partners that perpetuate this. I'm talking about women kind of consciously because I tend to use this remedy more with women. It's not by any means exclusively for women, though. Men, and you can see why, would also be just as vulnerable, and would therefore need a remedy like Staphylos aureus. Staphylos aureus can also set up those diversionary tactics for not really looking at issues. Can include things like eating too much, or being quite obsessive about things like the children's needs, for example, focusing always on the children, never on themselves. Those kind of things can indicate a need for Staphylos aureus. So when we think about the triggers for going into a Staphylos aureus state, either physically or emotionally, they're all the things that we've just gone through, really. So it's any situation where somebody feels power. Sorry, I cut out again there. My connection is not good today. So powerlessness, feeling like you've been a victim of some sort, feeling humiliated, or dominated. And it's not just those feelings, it's the feeling that you can't express how you feel about it to the people that have instigated the feelings, and therefore that feeling is kind of leaking out or affecting you on a physical level. It's also you can be tipped into it again if you're attacked physically. Obviously, there's the feelings of powerless and vulnerability, but particularly with knife wounds, or any kind of laceration to the tissue, which is why, as we said earlier, it's used, Staphylos aureus, quite a lot in post-surgery situations. Very effective, and childbirth as well. And it can be a regular natural childbirth, if you've got torn tissues, or even if you just feel that you felt humiliated in any situation, or that your lower regions are a bit kind of cut to bits, which is not uncommon. But also with the more medical childbirths, where there actually has been a lot of intervention, either with surgical devices and cutting, episiotomies, or any kind of tearing or cutting to the vaginal tissues, or indeed a C-section. Often that can indicate a need for Staphylos aureus as well. Obviously, violation, humiliation, rape, attacking, bullying, sustained bullying of any description, being the victim of it, that can definitely be helped by the remedy Staphylos aureus. And that can be in adults, in a work situation, for example, or in relationships, but it can also clearly be at school. So I've treated lots of quite young children who are either temporarily or have a pattern of being the victims of a more domineering child. And if you give the remedy, it just shifts the energy of the person who is in the pattern of being a victim. So they are much more forceful, much more able to walk away from things and feel all right about it, or to be able to say no, to put boundaries down, and not feel that they can't express themselves. Sometimes nothing even needs to be said. There doesn't need to be any confrontation. I'm reminded of the one of the nicknames for Staphylos aureus, which is mother-in-law's remedy. was told to me by one of my teachers many moons ago, of a situation where somebody had their mother-in-law staying, and they felt just on a permanent basis infuriated by the actions of this older lady. You can imagine what, telling them how to run their household, how to mind the kids, all of those things. But because it's their mother-in-law, they felt they couldn't offend her, they couldn't say anything. And Staphylos aureus was given for those reasons, those feelings of powerlessness and humiliation, and nothing was said, but the energy of the daughter-in-law shifted, and within, I think, a week, the mother-in-law had packed her bags and was moving back to her own house. So you don't necessarily need to have some kind of big confrontation when you give Staphylos aureus in order to break those patterns. It can just happen at a sort of subconscious level, which is why I love homeopathy, because lots of remedies can do that. So physical symptoms, we've talked about a few of them. Lots of bladder and kidney and urinary tract infections, cystitis and things like that. But also the effects of having to have a catheter. And therefore, often, very common, if you've had to have a catheter for some reason, either after childbirth or after surgery or whatever, that kind of violation of the body, particularly the bladder, can set up infections and things. And Staphylos aureus is very good at clearing that. Recovery from any kind of attack, particularly knife wounds and puncture wounds, is that's another physical symptom, tissue laceration. And we've talked about post-surgery, post-dental work, post-attacks of any description, but also into that arena becomes things like insect bites and insect stings. And if you have somebody who is in a kind of pattern of always being stung, and actually for a time in my life when I was much younger, I was too. I always got bitten. Doesn't matter where I was. I was the one that got covered in bites constantly. I'm very happy to say I'm not that way inclined anymore. But Staphylos aureus helped a lot, because insects bite us when the situations are right for them. And if we change the terrain, if we change ourselves energetically, and also, other things going on if we're not terribly well, our livers aren't working terribly well, for example, we'll be much more prone to parasites. And that's why Staphylos aureus actually is also very, very useful for things like head lice. If you have a child who is constantly falling prey to things like head lice, then Staphylos aureus can be a very good preventative and treatment of those horrible little creatures. Much more healthy than getting the over-the-counter head lice medications, which are so invasive and of course that far away from your brain, which we all need to remember before we apply them. Anyway, that's another day's work. Physical symptoms, again, anything to do with kind of anal or genital discomfort or pain, hemorrhoids, genital warts, vaginitis, those kind of things, particularly when you also have a history of some kind of vulnerability, powerlessness, a sense of being a victim. Even genital, did I say genital warts? Genital warts. Big nervous system remedy. lots of trembling and weakness, and that can come on obviously after there's been an attack of some description, or if you feel that you have been attacked in some way. Tend to have sweat or wind, flatus, or even breath that smells like rotten eggs. So if you've got that going on, as well as everything else, then Staph aureus will probably help. We've talked about stings and bites. There can be a constant desire to swallow. It's almost like they're trying to swallow those unwanted feelings. So lots of that kind of swallowing that you often see. Loads of sleep disturbances, difficulty sleeping, playing things over and over, tossing and turning. Lots of throat pathology, which is unsurprising when, for those of you that understand the energy systems that are based around our body, the throat is very much about self-expression and being able to be heard, being able to speak your truth. So anybody that's feeling that they can't do that, then it can often manifest in pathology in the throat. So, Sheila, sore throats could well be relevant here. And also stiff necks. If you've got a history of a stiff neck, again, it's this area that's manifesting or can be manifesting. Lots of desire for sugar, for sweets, and stimulants, and kind of appetite disorders, if you like. So there can be a complete loss of appetite, but what I see more is a kind of almost rabid appetite, that you just can't get enough because nothing's really satisfying you. It's like an emptiness in the lower abdomen that food just does not fill. So I've had a couple of people with that symptom where they, it's part of why they've come to see me is that they just can't stop eating because they just never feel that anything satisfies them. And that's a common Staph aureus symptom. Lots of eye inflammation, lots of styes and swollen eyelids and eyelid infections, blepharitis, stinging pains and cutting pains. That's a Staph aureus symptom. Like the recorded toxicology symptoms, lots of bloating and abdominal pains and a feeling of weakness in the lower abdomen as well. And again, that goes back again to those energy systems. The lower abdomen area is a very primal area energetically. It's often where we would feel any threat to our basic safety as human beings. So if there's lots of pathology in that region, it could well be that that area has been damaged by that, some kind of attack or feeling of powerlessness. There can be lots of ovarian pains and definitely a loss of sex drive. And the loss of sex drive can be because of some kind of violation in the past or sense of violation, or it can be a kind of cyclical thing because there is actually physical pathology there that's making it very uncomfortable. So you're in that arena, think Staph aureus. Nerve pains, lots of nerve pains, things like shingles and the trembling and weakness. They can be a big Staph aureus symptom as well. And constipation, a kind of holding on, not wanting to let go of things that are uncomfortable or that could be embarrassing or humiliating. So the constipation might manifest when there's a need to use a public loo, or somebody's in an unfamiliar situation or thinks that, you know, somebody might be able to hear them passing a stool, something like that. We've talked about, history of things like head lice and insect bites. The pains generally are sharp, cutting, stabbing pains. Think of that, those knives and lances and spears. Those sort of that's the kind of pain that will manifest in something needing Staphylococcus aureus. And there can also be a kind of stunned situation. Again, it's the nervous system that's being affected by it. It's that feeling of just like I have been stunned. I'm not quite fully in control of my faculties. And actually, interestingly, it did used to be used to stun fish and help people to catch them. That's the seeds of the delphinium. So there you go. So modalities. We always need to have modalities when we're prescribing homeopathically. What do I mean by that? I mean the little details that help you to differentiate between one remedy and another. So what might somebody be feeling a bit better for? What might they be feeling a bit worse for? Are there certain times of the day that they tend to feel worse, or times of the year, or temperatures, anything like that? So for Staphylococcus aureus, the main ones will be that they tend to feel some kind of relief, some kind of lifting of symptoms from warmth and from rest, and also actually from eating. These can be temporary relief, but they give some comfort. And they're much worse after a nap, so a short rest, and they're much worse for all of the things that we've already talked about, for humiliation, powerlessness, feeling like they're a victim, being attacked, having had some kind of knife wound or cut or, penetration of some sort. Loss of fluids as well. So if there's been a great loss of fluids, perhaps after a gut upset, when you've done lots of purging, that can be helped by Staphylococcus aureus as well. They are worse at night, and they're affected by the moon cycles too. So if you have somebody that says, much worse when there's a full moon, or, any other kind of obvious moon cycle change, then that can make a Staphylococcus aureus worse. And clearly, obviously, any kind of bullying or domination. So those are the main modalities for Staphylococcus aureus. Lots of what I've talked about is obviously applicable to adults more than children, but not everything. As we touched upon, these days, I think it's always been present actually, some kind of little bullying type experience by children in school in particular, or actually even by brothers and sisters. I've lost track of the adults who come into me and who have said, actually my brother bullied me all through my childhood. Just because it's one of your brothers or your sisters doesn't make it all right. It's, if it induces a feeling of being bullied, being dominated, being a victim, being powerless, then it can set up all sorts of pathology and all sorts of emotional upset. So never too late to treat that. But kids respond very well to remedies, and if they do get into that situation and they get stuck in it, they can't handle it, and they start to behave in ways that are not really about them. it's not really their character, then they might benefit from a dose of Staphylococcus aureus. Similarly, on a more physical level, a trip to the dentist, if you see that your child is struggling with the effects of that, or they're getting bitten a lot or getting head lice a lot or anything like that, Staphylococcus aureus might be the right remedy. There are other remedies as well, so always be mindful of that. But if you think it resonates, then why not give it a go? Or you can always ring me and ask my opinion, or if you're a member of my online support group, you can always ask in the group. So a lot of information to take in. I hope that it's kind of opened up the remedy a bit to you. There's lots more symptoms that I could list, but I think you've probably got enough to be getting along with. So if you've enjoyed this video, then let me know. That'd be great. Just send me a heart or a thumbs up. That'd be fantastic. Or if you have any experience of using Staphylococcus aureus yourself, or you think you might need it, or you have any questions about it, then do pop them in the thread below. That would be great. Or you can also message me privately. And if you want to learn a bit more about how to use kits like this one, or your own selection of remedies, then I do currently have a special offer on my online learning course. It's only available this week, so if you want to check that out, do click on the link accompanying this video. And I'm just going to give it a couple of minutes to see, does anyone want to wade in with any comments or experiences or observations about Staphylococcus aureus? Any questions? Just give it a couple of minutes. Just take a sip of my very cold tea by now. I hope you're enjoying the weather. It's a bit grey here today, actually, but we have had some lovely weather, so I'm very grateful for that. So I think that's probably it. Obviously, I'll be posting this as a replay, so you can watch it, share it. You can pop any comments that you might have below when the replay comes up. So as ever, thank you so much for watching and for listening. I hope you find it useful. Have a good day.